My night started like any other, with the alarm button pressed and trying to force myself to get up. But when I opened my eyes and saw that the room was dark and silent, something was wrong. Something is very wrong. I used to live in a normal suburb. My house stood in the corner of a small block where everyone knew each other. I worked in an IT company, and my days were filled with the same tasks and routine meetings. Life seemed calm and predictable until this happened. On Sunday morning, as usual, I went to the supermarket for shopping. As I got out of the car, I noticed that my car was painted fiery red. It was covered with drawings and inscriptions that did not belong to me. Not knowing what to think, I decided to take pictures of these creatures and email them to the security service. When I got home, I found the door to my house slightly ajar. It wasn't normal. I always locked the door, and I was always very careful. My heart began to beat faster, and I cautiously stepped inside. In the living room, I saw something strange. A photo was lying on my couch. The photo was taken in my house, and it was me sleeping on the same couch where it was laid out. My hands shook, and I felt a wave of cold fear wash over me. I tried to call the police, but it turned out that my phone was out of charge. I started looking for a charger for my phones, but suddenly I heard noises from downstairs. I think someone was in my basement. Now I stood on the edge of probability and reality, hoping that it was just someone's stupid prank. But the fear was too great to ignore. I knew I had to find out exactly what happened. And with every step down, I could feel the danger closing in on me, making me feel like I was just one wrong move away from a terrifying discovery. Every step I took up the stairs felt heavy, like I was walking through mud. The darkness in the basement was absolute. I tried flipping the switch, but none of them worked. My heart beat in time with my steps, and I heard my breath echoing like a loud sound in the silence. I came across a staircase that led down to the basement. My hands were sweaty when I reached them, and my legs were shaking. At first, I heard only a faint rustling, but as I got closer, the sound became clearer. It was a sound as if someone was digging into some material, as if someone was looking for something. Plunging into the darkness, I tried to get used to the absence of light, but my eyes did not. I felt around the walls, coming across old boxes and tools, until I finally came across something strange. It was a long cord that ran to one of the walls, with a broken wire protruding from it. I pulled the cord, and to my surprise, the dim light of the lamp came on, illuminating part of the basement. In the light, I saw large and small packages with something inside. I decided to check them out, but a sudden sound caught my attention. It was a sound that resembled a creaking door. I stopped and listened. It seems that someone was in the basement with me. My attempt to get closer to the exit proved unsuccessful when I noticed that a small part of the floor was open. Leading from it was a pipe with something moving in it. My heart sank when I realized it could be a sewer pipe or something else horrible. I tried to contact the police using an old radio I found among the boxes. Fortunately, the radio was working, but the signal was very weak. I heard only fragments of conversations, but I could not make out clearly what was being said. Eventually, I heard a sound from behind me, and when I turned around, I saw a shadow. She moved quickly as if someone was trying to hide in the dark. I could feel a cold sweat running down my back. It was as if I was being chased by an invisible enemy. I tried to find a way out, but the shadow was closing in on me, and every sound I heard made my fear grow. I decided to hide behind one of the boxes and try to wait for the morning, hoping that the radio would still be able to help contact someone. With each passing minute in the dark, my patience dwindled, and the fear that was inside became more and more unkindly apparent. My mind was filled with anxiety and the unknown. I couldn't stay in the basement forever, but with every noise in the dark, I felt the reality I knew begin to crumble. I sat behind the boxes, holding the radio and hoping that someone would hear my attempts to contact. My thoughts were intertwined with the shadows in the darkness, and every sound made me perceive danger as an imminent threat. Suddenly, there was a possibility that I could see by touch. Something that was from the remains of the room. There were fresh marks on the wall, as if someone had recently placed or moved something. I might come across some clues that would help me figure out what happened and who might be behind it. My investigation into the basement grew even more intense when I realized that this was more than just a random crime or petty act of vandalism. It was something bigger, something much scarier than I could have imagined. I began to feel like I was being watched, and every move I made felt like part of a bigger game where I was just a piece on the board. While the radio remained my only connection to the outside world, I realized that my stay in the basement was just the beginning, and what awaits me next may be even scarier than what I have already experienced. I stayed behind the boxes, listening for every sound. The shadow I saw was gone, but my sense of danger remained. I continued to search for answers among the chaotic items in the basement. The glow of a weak lamp illuminated only a small part of the space, but it was enough for me to notice several large wooden boxes standing in the corner. I decided to test one of them. After several unsuccessful attempts to lift the heavy lid, I managed to open it. Inside, I found a variety of tools, from the commonplace to the somewhat suspicious: knives, pliers, a few pieces of rope. My hand came across something cold and metallic. That was the big key. I examined it carefully. It was covered with old rust, but it looked very old and heavy. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized that the key could probably open some kind of lock. I began to search among the crates and boxes for a matching lock, hoping to find something that would explain the mystery. Hearing the sounds from below again, I felt a cold sweat running down my back. I witnessed a terrible scene when I saw a part of the wall that was painted with blood. It was a frightening sign that something terrible had happened here. I could feel the fear wash over me, but knowing that someone else might be in that basement gave me the strength to keep searching. I came across a large lock attached to the front door in one of the basement rooms. The key came, and the lock opened with a characteristic click. From inside, I saw a small room filled with various notes and old papers. The first few sheets were plain, but one of them had a plan of a house with inscriptions on it. I saw that there were several areas marked on the plan that did not correspond to any part of the house that I knew. In the corner of the room, I found an old notebook filled with notes. When I opened it, I saw that the entries were about people, their habits and schedules. I couldn't believe my eyes. It looked like someone was carefully watching me and my neighbors. Among these notes were also drawings and diagrams indicating various parts of the basement, and one of the diagrams showed an unknown passage that led further. I decided to follow these patterns and see where they lead. My heart pounded in fear again, but investigation was my only way out of this situation. I moved in the direction indicated on the diagram and found a small wooden panel that looked slightly off the wall. I carefully opened it and found a narrow passage. Its walls were covered with mold, and the darkness inside seemed even deeper. As I moved forward, I felt my every step grow heavier, as if the walls were moving around me. I heard a distant noise that again made me stop and listen. It was the sound of someone working with tools or digging in the ground. I kept walking forward, hoping to find something that would help solve this eerie mystery. I understood that my life was in danger, but I could not stop. And the deeper I went into this tunnel, the more I felt that I was getting closer to something terrible that could change everything I knew about my life. Every step in the narrow tunnel felt heavy, as if the air had grown thicker, and every sound I heard grew louder and more eerie. The tunnel twisted and moved as if trying to confuse me. I felt like I wasn't just in a basement, but something bigger and more sinister. The light of the lamp illuminated only part of the tunnel, and the rest was engulfed in darkness. I came across several doors that looked very old and rusty. I had a feeling they might be part of the cash system I read about in the notes. My hand touched one of the doors, and I felt it slide open easily. Inside were even more notes and papers that were clearly kept there for some specific purpose. I started going through these documents and realized that they were detailed records of various plans and movements of people. I came across a plan with clear markings and diagrams that indicated specific locations and rooms. Some of the marks were familiar, while others looked like new additions. I noticed one diagram that showed that on the second floor in one of the rooms, there was another secret exit that could be connected to the underground tunnels. I decided to try to find this way out, hoping that it would help reveal even more about what was going on in this house. When I came out of the tunnel, I found myself in another part of the basement. Here, everything looked neglected and covered with dust. I found old furniture and boxes that had not been touched for a long time. My attention was drawn to an old safe that was attached to the wall. The safe was locked, and I realized I needed a code to open it. On the boxes, I found pieces of paper with different numbers on them, which could possibly be part of a code. I started checking them, hoping it would lead me to something important. Suddenly, I heard someone approaching. I froze, tried to hide behind the nearest box, and listened. It seemed like someone was walking around the floor talking, but I couldn't make out the words. I decided to stay quiet and hide until I found out what was going on. I heard footsteps approaching. I held my breath and tried to remain invisible. The footsteps stopped nearby and I heard voices. My thoughts were full of anxiety and I focused on not giving myself away. "Are you ready?" came a man's voice. "Yes, everything is going according to plan. Just a few final steps left," another voice replied. These words made me feel even more afraid. I tried to look in, but the walls and boxes didn't allow a clear view. I understood that these people probably had some dark agenda and my stay here could be dangerous. Suddenly, I heard a sound like a safe being opened. This confirmed my suspicions that there might be something important inside the safe. I decided I needed to find out what was inside and avoid contact with those people if possible. I waited for the sounds to fade away and quickly returned to the safe. When I opened it, I found inside some papers and an old locket. The locket was quite heavy and had symbols engraved on it that I couldn't make out. I started looking through the documents. These were detailed records of people who had disappeared over the past few months, their descriptions, habits, and even photographs. These records seemed to indicate that these people were closely watched, and perhaps some of them were even killed. My heart was beating faster. It was a very scary find that confirmed my worst fears. I realized that I had become part of a terrible plan and that my life might be in danger. I decided that I needed to find a way out of this place as soon as possible and report everything to the police. But for that, you had to avoid people who might be in that basement. I began to move carefully, trying not to give myself away and to find out if there were other exits from this place. This is only part of the story. Each step in this dark world brings new horrors and clues that gradually paint the picture of the serial killer's terrible plan. I continued to move carefully in the darkness of the basement, trying to avoid anyone who might be here with me. My mind was captivated by the found documents and medallion, which turned out to be important for understanding what was happening. When I got to the end of the tunnel, I came across a door that looked marked as staff only. I decided to see if I could find even more information inside. The door was locked again, but I noticed that there was a combination lock. Remembering the numbers I found on the pieces of paper, I tried entering a few combinations, hoping it would work. As the lock clicked and the door opened, I felt fear and hope intertwine within me. The room inside contained more documents and papers, but also something else, a large map showing the various locations where the bodies had been found. I learned that these weren't just random killings, they were a carefully planned hunt. Also, I found an old laptop that was still on. I decided to look through his files, hoping it might give me more information. On the screen were opened documents with descriptions of the various victims, their photographs, and details of when and where they were last seen. It all became more and more terrifying when I realized that I could be next on this terrible list. I tried to connect my laptop to the internet to send the information I found to the police, but I understood that the connection was blocked. Someone probably intentionally restricted access to the network. My thoughts were filled with fear and anxiety when I suddenly heard a sound as if someone came to the door of the room. I quickly hid behind the large table, hoping I could remain inconspicuous. The footsteps grew louder and I could feel my heart beating faster. A man in dark clothes with a mask on his face entered the room. His movements were calm and confident, as if he knew what he was looking for. The man began looking through the documents I had left behind. I watched him through the gap between the table and the wall. My breathing became heavy and my nerves were on edge. As soon as he left the room, I knew this was my chance. I headed in the direction indicated on the map, hoping that it might be the way out of this horrible maze. I tried to be as quiet as possible as I moved through the darkness. My heart was pounding with fear and tension as I came upon another tunnel that led to the top floor. When I got out of it, I found myself in a part of the house I didn't recognize. It was a room filled with various tools and materials that I had seen in the basement before. I felt the fear wash over me as I realized that there could be even more terrible secrets. My thoughts were filled with anxiety, and I knew that I must act quickly to avoid further dangers. There were several doors in the room, each of which led to different parts of the house. I decided to test one of them. It led to a dark corridor where I heard what sounded like conversations. I tried to understand what was going on there, but my attempts to get closer were fruitless. I went to one of the doors and noticed that it was partially open. Through the gap, I could see several men sitting around a table discussing plans. Their conversations were hard to make out, but I could hear them discussing the number of casualties and next steps. I realized that this was part of their plan, and that every move they made was part of an even bigger and more terrifying plan. I decided I needed to find a way to contact the police or vacate the place. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. I decided to go back to the room with the laptop and try again to find a way to provide the information. When I returned, I noticed that something had changed. The documents I had left behind were gone. I realized that someone had been here and looked at my findings. My situation became even more tense. I began to look for alternative ways of communicating with the outside world, checking every possibility. I found an old radio, but its signal was very weak. I decided to try to contact someone, hoping that even a small amount of information might help. Suddenly, I heard someone approaching. I quickly stopped and hid in the dark, hoping not to be seen. The body I saw looked like one of the people I had seen before. He walked straight to the room where I was and started checking everything on his way. I realized that I needed to get out of here as soon as possible. My life was in danger, and every moment in this place became more and more dangerous. I set out in the direction indicated on the plan, hoping to find a way out and avoid further dangers. I came across a new part of the house that looked even more confusing. They were rooms full of old furniture, boxes, and suspicious objects. I noticed that everything here was arranged very carefully, as if it was part of a plan, and every item had its place. I continued to follow the plan, hoping to find a way out. Suddenly, I came across a large metal hatch that led down. I decided to see what might be there. Opening the hatch, I saw stairs leading to an even darker and musty tunnel. As I descended, I felt it getting even darker around me. I could feel the fear coming over me again, but I kept moving forward. My thoughts were filled with anxiety, and I tried to find a way out of this maze. At the bottom of the tunnel, I came across some old crates and boxes. I opened them and found various items, from old photos to pieces of clothing. It all reminded me of the sacrifices I read about in the notes. I felt my fear turn to panic as I realized I was in for a real trap. I was on the very edge of danger, and every new step could be the last. I knew I had to find a way out as soon as possible, and I kept looking, hoping that I could escape death and find a way to the tunnel became even more stifling and dark, and I could feel my strength draining away. Every step felt heavy, and the fear was almost physical. My thoughts were scattered, but the only thing I knew was that I had to find a way out. I came across a new room filled with old wooden crates and boxes. All the walls were covered with dark marks, and the room seemed neglected and abandoned. In one of the corners, I noticed a large mirror. This mirror was dirty and cracked, but I decided to check it out. Under it, I found a heavy metal box. Opening the box, I saw several documents and photographs. These were the last records of the maniac, detailed plans and personal notes. I found addresses, dates, and places that would help to understand the whole picture. It was like a mosaic showing the massive game I had fallen into. Suddenly, I heard voices from the corridor. They were getting closer, and I knew I had to act fast. I quickly hid the documents and decided to find a new way out. I returned to the tunnel again and came across an old control panel. It looked like part of an old security system. I decided to try it. There was a button labeled Exit on the remote control. I pressed it, and suddenly there was a loud sound, as if some mechanism had started to work. Several parts of the wall and floor began to move, opening a new passage. When I passed through the passage, I found myself in a large room with access to the surface. On the other side, I saw light and heard voices of people. I realized that this might be my only chance to get out. I jumped out of the room and ran to the exit, where I finally saw the police and rescuers already on the scene. My struggle eventually ended. I was able to find help and avoid danger. I told the police everything I found out. They started an investigation and found a lot of evidence that confirmed my words. It turned out that this house and basement were part of a large criminal network engaged in serial murders. I was taken to the hospital to be checked out and treated, but I could not forget what I experienced. Every night brought horrible memories of what I saw. It was a dark part of my life that I will hardly be able to completely forget. I put this experience behind me, but I knew that my life had changed forever. I was no longer the same, and the memory of that horrible experience will always stay with me. And although I survived, I will never forget those dark corridors and what I experienced being under the power of a real monster. My story is coming to an end, but what I experienced will stay with us forever as a constant reminder that fear and darkness can be found in even the most unexpected places. Expected places. Expected places.